Yep, Andrea, debtor. I think at present I could actually even be an under earner, but this is a relatively new label for me because I've just retired. So I've been in DA for about 13 years. And over that time, I've probably done the steps with the DA focus 3 times. And funnily enough, I'm right on step 4 at the moment in my sort of 4th go through. So it's probably very apt that I'm getting to share on this. I'll give you a little bit of background of my past. My family was a kind of a feast or famine kind of a family. My father was a ladies' hairdresser. He did very well in the 50s and 60s when everybody was having their hair done. And then in the 70s, everybody started to grow their hair long and he went out of business. And so he had to find a new career in his 40s. And I only really understand this in retrospect, of course, because, you know, as the child in the family, I thought it was all about me. And, you know, they were just being mean when they wouldn't let me buy new clothes or whatever. So, yeah, so my background was, and then they had a couple of an inheritance, and they won what we call here the golden kiwi a couple of times, where it was kind of like a big windfall of money. So we'd go from, you know, living on the smell of an oily rag to living in kind of this crazy abundance that probably only lasted about a year, and then we'd be back to square one again. So I had absolutely no training whatsoever in how to deal with money. And when I did my first step 4 in DA, there was a lot of, in the resentment section, there was a lot of really resenting their lack of education, I suppose, for me, and, you know, that it was their fault, and that I was hopeless with money, and, you know, what chance did I have, etc., etc. But through my other times through the steps, I've come to a place, they're both dead now, and I've come to a place of real forgiveness for them, because they too had no education about money, you know, so it's that's a family sort of disease. So in terms of my own, you know, starting to take responsibility for my own culpability and my inability to deal with money, which I also, you know, managed to, maybe in the 2nd and 3rd time through, I managed to kind of put it more down, you know, to cleaning up my own side of the street. In my early recovery in another fellowship, I was a solo mother on the DPB, and so the idea of, you know, I just lived hand to mouth, literally. And I had no frivolous spending. There was no frivolous spending to be happening. But then about 5 years into my recovery, I got a really good job, and I 6-figure salary. I was able to buy a house. I got 3 credit cards because suddenly I had all this money coming in and the banks start to take notice of you. I did that thing of, you know, putting the money from one credit card onto another for lower interest. I did that 3 times, but I never got rid of the original credit card. So anyway, the story is that I crawled into DA with 3 overdrawn credit cards and a $100,000 revolving credit that was used up. And I had no idea how I was going to be able to pay that back. And so what happened was I just did all the very, very, very simple things that DA teaches us to do, writing down everything I spent, everything that was coming in. I realized my ability of being, you know, an investment property owner. I wasn't cut out for it. I had to admit to myself that that wasn't where my skill set lay. So I sold my house that I had terrible pea-smoking tenants in. And so I was able to realise that debt and pay off the credit cards and pay off the revolving line of credit. So literally within 11 months of being in DA, I was debt free, and that is an amazing, amazing miracle. And it's no wonder that I continued doing the suggested things like doing the steps, because I could see so well, you know, it's a real action program for me. And by doing all those suggested things like the steps and having a sponsor and talking to the sponsor and having sponsees and doing service, I actually saw a complete 180 turnaround in my life. So I knew that it worked. And so going from the, you know, that complete rock bottom, the waking up at 4 in the morning, the stress, the anxiety was just, you know, my recovery was quite swift. And in order to keep that going, I continued to, you know, keep doing the steps. And during that time, one of the things that I did was I took my resentments to the Camino. That's the walk around the Camino to Compostela. And each resentment that I had that was, you know, to do with, I don't know, old bosses, family, of course, relations, people that had let me down. I'd hold one of the rocks that I'd find on the path, and I'd speak to the resentment that I had, and then when I felt that I'd filled that rock up with as much resentment as it could handle, I'd throw it into the abyss. And in a really weird way, that kind of has released me from that that thing of always, you know, when the mind is still and clear, I always had those kind of thing. Oh, well, I'll just go back to worrying about that, or I'll just go back to thinking about that, you know, the grievance I have for that person. And by doing that, I sort of really released them into another part of my brain where they weren't taking up space for free. And I don't know whether that's handy for anybody else. It's more of an 8-step, 9-step thing to do, I guess. But, you know, it was by realizing and writing down those resentments that I realized that, you know, if I continued to carry them all around with me without handing them over to something else, they were going to just weigh me down, and I was going to be able to blame those, you know, my parents, for instance, for not giving me any handy hints. You know, that's 3 minutes.
3 minutes left, hun.
Oh, thanks, darling. You know, in my strange addict brain, I even kind of managed to blame bosses that I stole off. Do you know what I mean? If they hadn't made it so easy for me to steal, then I never would have stolen, you know. I worked in lots of pubs in Europe, and when I was on my overseas experience, and you know, the tills were open. There was no what do you call it? There was no ticky tape. So I just used to steal, and I stole from shops. They made that easy for me because it was pre-camera days, and it's really great these days that I am very honest in all my affairs. I do. Oh, the other day I had a trolley in the supermarket. I'll just bypass to this. And I paid for all the groceries, and then I realised I had a listener, which is a very thin little magazine that we have here, still in the bottom of my trolley. So I turned around and I went back and I paid the $6. So, you know, those are the sorts of things that I would never, ever have thought to do back in the day, either, you know, pre my first fellowship days or pre coming into DA. I would have just seen it as a stroke of luck or a bit of good fortune. So just to finish off, the forgiveness is a really great tool. It's been really great for me. And being kind of in the middle of just starting step 4 again. Lovely to hear Anton share on step 3. I was a bit late for the beginning of that, but just, you know, until I have a higher power that I can understand and trust, I can't go on. And so being in step 4 it's, there's a wonderful opportunity to completely be honest about, where I actually am absolutely right now with, 13 years of recovery.
1 minute left, love.
Thanks, darling. With all this amount of recovery, but I'm not recovered, so I still have some, I wrote down some of those warning signs, if I staying out of the shops, but it's okay to go to the Salvation Army. I still have these little kind of tricky things that trip me up. So I've got to watch myself, I've got to be mindful, and I've got to keep doing the steps. And I now can't wait to begin my journey and to see what's going to happen, what wants to happen in my life. Thank you very much for listening.